The northern plains lay buried beneath a blizzard's hush. White winds charged through the emptiness, bending skeletal trees and erasing the edges of the world. Wagon wheels creaked against frozen ground. Horses snorted steam into the beating air, their breath forming small clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Buckton Road stretched ahead like a scar across the snow-beaten landscape. A lonely cut-through territory that swallowed travelers whole if they weren't careful. Every breath struck cold. The storm's silence pressed down like a weight, broken only by the rhythmic crank of hoofs and the occasional groan of wood against iron. This was the Wild West Strip Bare. Number romance, number glory, just survival measured in miles, and the hope that home wait on the other side of the white. Jonah Mercer guided his wagon forward with the steady grip of a man who'd made this journey 100 times before. Frost clung to his beard, turning the dark hair silver at the edges. Weariness lived in his eyes, not the tiredness of a single day, but the deep exhaustion that came from years of loss, labor, and loneliness. His hands, calloused from rope bends and fence posts, from branding irons and wagon rinds, held steady despite the cold gnawing at his fingers. He wore a heavy coat that had seen better seasons, patched at the elbows, worn thin at the shoulders. Beside him, his 6-year-old son, Caleb, huddled close, wrapped in a wool coat that had belonged to someone bigger. The boy's eyes were wide beneath his father's head, too large for his small head, but necessary against the wind. They were leaving town after picking up supplies, salt, flour, lamp oil, the essentials that would carry them through another brutal winter on the ranch. The ride home would take horse, and darkness was already creeping across the plains. Then Caleb took his sleeve. His small voice barely rose above the wind. "Papa, look at her eyes." Jonah pulled the reins. The horses slowed, grateful for the rest. And there, standing in the middle of Buckton Road like an apparition, was a woman who should not have been there. She stood barefoot in the snow. Her feet were already stained red where the cold had cracked her skin. She wore a cream-colored dress, lace at the collar, intricate stitching along the bodice, the kind of garment meant for ceremony, not survival. But the hem was frozen stiff, the fabric torn at the shoulder, and the lace hung wilted and soaked. Her dark hair clung wet to her pale cheeks, strands plastered against her skin like she'd been shut in the storm for horse. She didn't shiver, didn't move, just stood there with her arms loose at her sides, staring at the wagon as though she'd been expecting it, as though she'd been waiting for Jonah Mercer specifically. Jonah's chest tightened. Recognition hit him like a fist. Mara Hire. The name echoed in his mind, dragging memories with it. The woman he'd once intended to marry. The woman who'd sat beside him at church socials, who'd laughed at his clumsy jokes, who touched his hand in the bun when number one was looking and promised him a future. Until one day, 2 winters ago, she vanished. Number warning, number explanation, just gone. Folks in town had their theories. Some said she'd run off with a drifter passing through. Others claimed she'd married into money somewhere east. A few whispered darker things, that she'd dared, that she'd been taken, that she'd simply chosen to forget Jonah Mercer exit. And now she stood in the snow like a runaway bride, bleeding and silent, waiting for him to decide what came next. Jonah clambered down from the wagon without speaking. His boots sank into the snow. Each step deliberate, courteous. The way a man approaches something he doesn't trust. Mara didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched him with those dark eyes that once held warmth, but now seemed hollow, emptied of something vital. Up close, he could see the tremor in her jaw, the way her lips had turned faintly blue. Her hands hung limp at her sides, fingers pale as bone. Caleb peered over the wagon's edge, his small face pinched with concern. "Is she a ghost, Papa?" Jonah sighed quietly. She's real, but he wasn't entirely certain. He stripped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her frame. She was thinner than he remembered. Angles where softness used to be. Shadows beneath her cheekbones that spoke of hunger or sleeplessness or both. When he touched her arm to guide her toward the wagon, her skin felt like ice through the wet fabric of her dress. "Can you walk?" he asked. Mara nodded, but her first step faltered. Her feet left small prints of blood in the snow. Jonah caught her before she fell, lifting her with an ease that surprised him. She weighed almost nothing. He sat her in the back of the wagon among the supply crates and grain sacks, then clambered back to the driver's seat. Caleb twisted around to stare at her, fascination overriding fear. "Why don't you have shoes?" the boy asked. Myra's voice came out hoarse, barely louder than the wind. "I left in a hurry." Jonah snapped the reins. The horses lurched forward, eager to escape the call. The wagon rolled onward through the storm, carrying 3 people bound by silence and questions that felt too heavy to voice. Snow continued to fall in thick tines, erasing their tracks as quickly as they were made. The mature ranch appeared through the white like a mirage, a low cabin with a sagging porch, a barn that leaned slightly westward, fences half buried in drifts. Smoke rose from the chimney, a promise of warmth. Jonah helped Mara down from the wagon and guided her inside while Caleb scrambled ahead to stop the fire. The interior was simple: wooden table, iron stove, shelves lined with canned goods and worn books. A single lantern cast long shadows across the walls. Mira moved toward the stove like a moth to flame, hands extended toward the heat. Jonah fetched blankets from the bedroom, rough wool that smelled faintly of cheddar and horses, and wrapped them around her shoulders. She sank onto a chair, head bowed, dark hair falling forward to hide her face. Caleb watched from the corner, quiet now, sensing the weight of adult troubles he couldn't yet name. Silence filled the cabin. Outside, snow crackled against the roof in a slow, steady rhythm. The fire popped and hissed. Minutes stretched. Jonah stood near the door, arms crossed, jaw working as he fought to contain the storm building inside him. Finally, the words came out rough, scraped raw by 2 years of wandering. You disappeared, left me like a fool standing at your door with flowers and plants. Folks said you ran off with a drifter. Others said you married Ray and didn't have the decency to say goodbye. Myra's shoulders tensed beneath the blankets. She drew a tremulous breath, but didn't look up. Both stories were wrong, she whispered. Then tell me the right one. She lifted her head slowly, eyes reflecting firelight. Her expression held something between shame and defiance, grief and relief, the complicated geography of a truth too long buried. I was promised to a banker's son in Copper Ridge. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Jonah went still. The name Copper Ridge carried weight. It was a 3-day ride east, a town built on silver veins and merchant wealth, where bankers wore tailored suits and their wives dripped in jewelry shipped from San Francisco. It was everything his ranch was not. Mara continued, her voice barely steady. My family arranged it. They said marrying you would trap me in poverty. They said you weren't. She swallowed hard. They said you weren't no. Caleb shifted in the corner, small eyes darting between his father and the woman wrapped in blankets. The boy understood little about marriage and class, but he understood when he had it. Jonah's jaw tightened, and you agreed. Number. The word came out sharp, almost angry. Mara looked up at him fully now, and for the first time since appearing on that snow-buried road, there was fire in her eyes. I didn't agree to anything, but my father didn't ask for my permission. He made the arrangement with Jacob Drummond, the banker, over whiskey and cigars. They shook hands on it like I was livestock being traded. She pulled the blanket tighter, knuckles white. When I told them I had already promised to you that we'd made plans, my father laughed. Said I was playing romance with a dirt farmer and it was time to grow up. My mother cried, but didn't defend me. She said I'd thank them someday when I had a proper house and a proper name. Jonah felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger exactly, but something deeper: class, wealth, the invisible chains that bound people more effectively than iron ever could. Had known men were judged worth by land deeds and bank accounts, were measured a person's value in dollars rather than character. Had never imagined Myra's family would be among them. They sent me away before I could tell you, Myra sighed quietly. Packed my things in the middle of the night and took me to Copper Ridge under the guise of preparing for the wedding. They killed it training for refinement, etiquette lessons, posture coaching, how to hold a teacup, how to greet guests at parties, how to smile without showing too much feeling. Her voice cracked. They locked me in their guest house. Said it was for my own protection to keep me from making foolish decisions. Jonah exhaled slowly. A cage with less curtains and fine china, a prison that smelled of perfume instead of rust. For 2 years, he asked. Jacob Drummond traveled frequently for business. The wedding kept being postponed. First for his father's illness, then for a business deal in Denver, then because the weather wasn't suitable. Bitterness edged her words. I think he didn't actually want a wife. Just the appearance of one when it suited him. Meanwhile, I lived in that guest house like a doll, in a box, taken out and displayed when necessary, then put back on the shelf. Caleb crept closer, drowned by the pain in her voice. He clambered onto the chair beside her, small hand reaching toward hers. Mara glanced down at him, and something in her expression softened. And the wedding dress, Jonah sighed, nodding toward the ruined garment beneath the blankets. Myra's eyes filled with something between rage and relief. Tonight was the wedding. They finally said it that. Jacob returned from his latest trip and my father insisted it happen immediately before I could cause problems. He sighed, they dressed me, painted my face, and put flowers in my hair. She paused, breathing hard. And when they left me alone to prepare for the ceremony, I clambered through the window, tore the dress on the frame, ran barefoot into the snow without staying one more minute felt like dying. Jonah stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman before him with the girl he'd known 2 years ago. That mirror had been softer somehow, less hardened by the world's cruelties. This woman bore scars that didn't show on her skin. The kin carved by betrayal and captivity dressed up as care. You ran, he sighed slowly. In a snowstorm, without shores, without knowing where you'd end up. I knew exactly where I'd end up, Mara correct. Anywhere but there. Death in the snow seemed preferable to a lifetime married to a man who saw me as an acquisition. She met his eyes. I walked for hours, followed the road west but as I remembered it led back toward the plains. Toward home, toward. She stopped herself, but the unspoken word hung between them. Toward you. Caleb's small fingers curled around hers. The boy's touch seemed to anchor her, pulling her back from whatever dark place the memories had dragged her toward. She squeezed his hand gently, but Jonah wasn't finished. The question that had haunted him for 2 years demanded answers, and now that she sat before him, real breathing, bleeding, he couldn't let it go unanswered. Then why didn't you send a letter? His voice came out rougher than intended. One note could have changed everything. I would have come for you, burnt that guest house to the ground if I had to. But you left me with silence, Mira. 2 years of nothing. At that, Myra's eyes filled with tears that finally spilled over. Her face crumpled, and when she spoke, her voice broke into tears. I did, she whispered. I read to you 3 times. Jonah froze. The first letter I read 2 weeks after they told me. I explained everything. Where I was, what I'd done, how much I needed you to know I didn't choose this. Tears tracked down her cheeks, catching firelight. The second letter came a month later when I realized you hadn't responded. I thought maybe the first had been lost. I read again, begging you to write back, even if it was just to say you'd moved on. Her hands trembled beneath Caleb's. The third letter I read after a number of months. By then, I was desperate. I told you where the guest house was, what time the gods changed shifts, how you could reach me if you wanted. I gave every detail I could think of. Jonah's heart pounded. I never received any letters. I know that now, Mara sighed, voice thick. But I didn't know it then. I thought, she broke off, choking on the words. I thought you'd chosen silence. I thought maybe my family was right about you, that you decided I wasn't worth the trouble, or worse, that you were glad I was gone. Who delivered them? Jonah demanded, though something cold and terrible was already forming in his mind. Mara whipped at her tears with shaking fingers. Your foreman came to Copper Ridge on business. I saw him from the window, recognized him immediately. I managed to get the letters to him through a maid who felt sorry for me. Wild Hennessy, he promised had delivered them personally. Swear on his honor he'd put them directly in your hands. Wild Hennessy, the name landed like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. Jonah's foreman, a man who'd worked at the ranch for 5 years, a man whose admiration for Mara had always carried an edge of something darker, possessiveness disguised as conscience, jealousy wrapped in loyalty. Walt, who'd been there the night Mara vanished, offered hollow condolences and sighed, maybe it was for the best that a woman like her would have ground bored with ranch life. Eventually, Walt, who'd watched Jonah grieve and said nothing, the truth twisted, reshaped, a betrayal neither of them had seen coming. Jonah sat down heavily, the weight of realization pressing through him like a physical force. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles wide. Wild Hennessy, a man he trusted with his cattle, his land, his livelihood. A man who'd stood beside him through harsh winters and difficult swing seasons, a man who'd smiled and offered whiskey when Jonah couldn't sleep, who'd listened to him talk about Myra's disappearance and nodded sympathetically while knowing exactly where she was and why she'd never written back. He destroyed them, Jonah sighed quietly. Not a question, a statement of fact that tasted like ash. Mara nodded, fresh tears sliding down her face. I didn't understand why you never came. Why did you never respond? The maid told me Walt had taken the letters and promised to deliver them within days. But weeks passed, months, nothing. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I started to believe what my family had said about you. That you weren't strong enough to fight for me. That you'd given up too easily. Maybe I'd imagined the love between us. Jonah closed his eyes. All this time, he built his own truth because it had less than uncertainty. He told himself that Myra had chosen wealth over him, that she'd looked at his rough hands and simple cabin and decided she deserved better. Had carried that story like armor, letting it harden him against the pain of her absence. And all the while, she'd been locked away, thinking he'd abandoned her. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Walt hadn't just stolen letters. Had stolen 2 years from both of them. 2 years of grief and misunderstanding. 2 years of Myra imprisoned and Jonah alone. 2 years that could never be recovered. Why? Myra asked, her voice small and broken. Why would he do that?